the principles for which the Baha'is are persecuted is, as a matter of fact, the principles of democracy, of human right, of separation of church and state, of equality of men and women, of the unity of all religions, of the beauty of all human beings. And this culture have always been considered as a threatening culture to the power of the Muslim clergy.
I did hear about the Baha'i students getting kicked out of the universities in Iran through a Human Rights Watch website article. So an article that they put out when it was happening informed me of it, but I didn't see it in news elsewhere, which I did find troubling. But I personally, I was completely unaware of the Baha'i faith until last year when I was doing a study where I was specifically trying to look at how bureaucratic institutions that run under the governance of Islam, and how basically when I looked at political systems run within the Islamic religion, was I had to explore that in depth, and then that in depth in Iran before I was familiar with the Baha'i faith, and perhaps that's just my experience didn't lead me to that. But I think that there's certainly a dearth of representation of the Baha'i faith in our culture. Most of my friends, I've been telling people, I'm doing lunch at this time today because I've heard about this documentary that I want to be a part of. And I say it's about the Baha'i faith, and everybody I talk to says, "What's that?"
I actually have not heard about this issue, which is surprising because I do try and stay up to date with current events. And when we hear about Iran, we hear about should we bomb them or not instead of should we educate everyone equally or not. And I think that's a much more important issue to worry about. And I feel like on campus there hasn't been any awareness about that, or if there has been, it's just probably a couple of students who cannot get their voice heard that loudly. So I feel like definitely we need to get more aware on this campus and overall just to participate as college students. And universally, everyone has the right to get an education, whether they're in the U.S. or whether they're in Iran or Cambodia or anywhere in the world. So I feel like based on religious grounds, there should not be prosecution and justice like this.
I'd never heard about this problem before. So I guess there is a problem with awareness in that sense, but I think that awareness can only do so much, and even if we did know about it, there are a lot of other problems in the world, and you kind of have to pick which ones you want to solve.
Shortly after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, large numbers of Baha'i youth and children were expelled from school. In the 1990s, in response to pressure from the international community, the government allowed children in primary and secondary school to once again attend classes. The ban on higher education remained in place. Baha'i youth could not take the entrance examination required for acceptance to university because the examination forms required that they declare themselves to belong to one of the 4 recognized religions in Iran: Islam, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, or Judaism. If they were not of one of these religions, then they could not take the exam. In 1987, the Baha'is formed their own university known as the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education. At its peak, the institute enrolled more than 900 students and utilized a volunteer faculty of more than 150 instructors and academics. Classes were conducted in private homes. More than 200 courses were offered each term.
Dr. Saidi, what was your role in the Baha'i Institute of Higher Education in Iran?
I was one of the teachers or advisors to the university, but I couldn't be directly present there. I can't go back to Iran for the same reason that that university exists, namely the Islamic Republic of Iran does not recognize the civil rights of the Baha'is, and Baha'is are deprived of various civil rights, including the right to education. And many of the Baha'is who have been recognized as authors or activists and so on have been killed or kidnapped and so on. So varieties of complications exist that Baha'is born in Iran unfortunately cannot be in Iran and cannot serve the country that they love, including me.
I have not heard about the Iran situation with Baha'i youth, but I do think it deserves our attention because every child deserves education no matter what their religion or ethnic background.
These limitations are compensated by the spirit, by the power of a spirit of self-determination, of the enthusiasm for learning. Education for these kids is not a pursuit, an arbitrary pursuit of taste for occupational gains. That is not the primary meaning of education for these kids. It is affirmation of the dignity of their human rights, the dignity of their soul.
In 1998, the government responded by staging a series of raids lasting from September into October. Some 36 faculty members were arrested, and many of the Institute's records and materials were confiscated. The Institute functions even today, although government officials continue to raid classrooms periodically.